In the words of Elizabeth Barrish Brown, from our very first breath, we reach out. Co-regulation, not self-regulation, is in our nature. We find our cues from the sun and the moon, from each parent and caregiver. We find our place in this great turning planet by turning to one another. Generation to generation, we awaken to the dawn and fall asleep at the evening's end. Our life's journey is part of something greater, something simple, something divine. A flame cannot be lit without a spark. A life cannot begin without the air. And we cannot begin to find ourselves without love. May we reach out to one another. May we offer love and nurturing care. May we join together in celebration of the interdependence of our lives. In this spirit, let us worship together. We light our chalice this morning to celebrate mothers and mothering, to celebrate those who have taken on the task of nurturing a young baby, child, or youth into adulthood, to celebrate those who have nourished the light of truth and compassion in growing minds and hearts, to celebrate those who have committed time, money, energy to the growth of others in this world. We light this chalice to celebrate and to hold dear this flame of love. Our reading for this morning is a story, the story of a woman named Lota Hitchmanova, mother of 1,000. Lota was born almost exactly 100 years ago in a city called Prague. Her family was Jewish and they were comfortable. Her parents made sure she had a wonderful education. She spoke many languages. Her family spoke to her in English, German, Italian, and Spanish. She studied Latin and Greek in school, and her mother used to tell her, learn to speak with different people and you will go far. Well, when Lota was a young woman, the Nazis invaded. She was a young journalist and she wrote articles saying that what the Nazis were doing was wrong. She had to travel from country to country, Belgium and France, trying to find somewhere safe. And everywhere she went, the war seemed to follow and spill over because the Nazis kept invading. Eventually, with the help of some Unitarians who ran a service committee that rescued people from the war, Lota made it across the ocean to Canada, and she was safe there. She joined a Unitarian church in Ottawa. But when Lota got to safety, she didn't stop thinking about the people who were still in danger. She thought about the children who had no homes. She thought about the families who had no food. And she said to herself, I want to do something about this. So she started asking questions and going to meetings, churches, and other places. She told people, we have so much, and these other people over there don't have anything. People listened. They gave her food and clothes and money to share with people around the world who needed it. She helped to start the Unitarian Service Committee of Canada that did this work on a much bigger scale. And she did something special that we hold up, I think, especially in mothering, which is that she didn't just hand out the food and the clothes and tell people, here, this is what you need. She listened first to what they said they needed, and only then did she help. And this took her, indeed, all around the world, to Italy and Japan after their wars, to Korea and Vietnam, to India and Bangladesh, Greece and Jordan, to Indonesia and Nepal. Wherever there were people whose lives had been broken by war or hunger or disaster, Loda showed up and she listened first. And then she helped. She never had any children of her own. She never married, but the people she helped started calling her the mother of 1,000 because she had mothered so many. So on this Mother's Day, when we think about all the people who are mothers and mothering, people who feed us and listen to us and show up when we need them, we can think of Loda and those like her too. Whenever someone says, I see you, I hear you, what do you need? How can I help? Which is something we can all do. And that is more than enough. It is right and good to hold up and honor the ideals of motherhood. And it is also good to think about the challenges on the ground and the realities, which I hope to do a little bit of as well this morning. There's a powerful scene in a book called Fair Play by Eve Rodsky. Has anyone read it? She describes flying across the country with her cousin, both new moms. They found themselves frantically juggling 1,000 household tasks while on the plane and preparing for 1,000 more. Texting with babysitters and contractors and telling their husbands what needed to be done, managing all the things that needed to be managed even from the air, traveling across the country. And then they happen to look across the aisle, and there sits a man with a crisp charcoal suit on, a wedding band, traveling with no more than a laptop, and he opened it to a screensaver. They were kind of peeking over, and they saw what looked to be his smiling wife and 3 kids smiling at him. And then as they continued to work on all of their tasks, they didn't miss the fact that he just hit a button and they disappeared, and he had his computer screen in front of him where he was able to work without interruption for 2 hours on a PowerPoint presentation, or what seemed to be for his job, and then take a nap, watch a movie, play a math game, seemingly for fun. and they thought, his mental load is light. He is singularly focused. And so Eve asked her cousin Jessica, what do you think? Well, he amuses himself by solving the math problems. What do you think his wife is doing right now at home? And Jessica said, I think she's solving every other problem. So the man across the aisle could be singularly focused because someone else in his household was carrying everything else, right? And what that someone else was carrying is what so many mothers carry virtually every day and mostly invisibly. The mental load of keeping track of everyone's schedules, the emotional labor of meltdowns in the middle of the night, the constant attention to making sure the toothpaste and toilet paper don't run out, and the work of preparing everyone for the day before the day begins, cooking and cleaning up and putting them to bed at the end of it all. And you know the list goes on. So to my thinking, to honor Mother's Day correctly, we need to do two things. We need to both celebrate and make visible the wonderful work of mothering, and also to name the inequities that make it harder than it should be, and commit to working to change them as we can. Why is it that even in households that try hard to distribute the work equally, it can be so challenging? One study finds that the mothers end up doing the mental load more, even when a heterosexual couple is splitting, the work, right? So part of the answer is that we have to look at the structural and the cultural context that we find ourselves in. The problem and the inequity of labor that falls upon mothers traditionally, in traditional households at least, is baked into our society. And this is true even in the fundamental way that our political thinkers have imagined the very image of the human person in the modern world. I was thinking back to my political science classes in college, to the 17th century English philosopher Thomas Hobbes. He has a foundational text to modern political theory, and he asks us to consider the human being in a state of nature, he calls it. But he says, through almost a sleight of hand, he says, but not from the womb. Suddenly, they are rather coming up into full maturity like mushrooms springing up from the earth overnight. Independent entities. Surprise! As if no work was involved in nurturing, in mothering our young, and the task of teaching them and helping them grow into independent people, capable of freely acting as they choose in the world. Sovereign individuals, in the sense of not controlled in their behavior by outside forces. He essentially erases all this work of mothering and caregiving from the foundations of political thought, to the advantage of men like himself. And Hobbes is not alone in this. Virtually the whole history, the whole tradition of course, male Western political thought has imagined the human person this way, and we're still living with consequences to this type of thinking. Now, there are exceptions to this, happily. One such exception today is the historian and scholar of authoritarianism, Timothy Snyder, who speaks to this directly in his book on freedom. He argues that that the foundation of real freedom, this same freedom that Hobbes talked about, this capacity for sovereign action, independent action in the world, rests on capacities that were nurtured in us by those who raised us. Basic capacities like the ability to think independently, to regulate our emotions, rather than simply reacting to whoever is shouting the loudest. The capacity to pause between stimulus and response and choose a response deliberately. The capacity to resist manipulation by authoritarian dictators. The foundation of this freedom is the mothering we have received. Snyder writes, quote, "Freedom requires capacity, capacity requires attention in childhood, and attention requires time. It follows that parents' time, and the mother's above all, belongs to freedom." Research is clear about how these capacities develop through constant physical and vocal contact, trusting relationships, unstructured play, choices about things and people, the patience to teach a child to feel their feelings, not to react right away, but to regulate them and act with deliberation. The basic freedom of every adult was given as a gift, or perhaps a loan, to be paid forward by our mothers, or more expansively, by all those who have mothered us. By those who held us, fed us, talked to us, taught us to name what we felt, gave us choices, and simply took the time to give us the attention we needed. And indeed, raising a child takes a community, not just one person. It's a social project and a generational one. In these ways, mothering sets us free. There's another wonderful political theorist, Joan Tronto, in her book, Caring Democracy. She comes at the same problem from a slightly different angle, reaching, I would say, similar conclusions. She argues that the work of caring, of which mothering is the most universal example, has been pushed to the margins of our economic and political life, and that this has consequences connected to what we are now living through politically in this country. She argues we are right now getting something dangerously wrong. And she also traces back a little bit the history of thinking. She goes back to the German sociologist Max Weber, who equated hard work with virtue and divine favor. The work ethic that we have inherited, which says that what counts is what produces money, right? And in that frame, as you know, the domestic work of mothering, feeding, raising, tending, holding, becomes almost invisible and dramatically undervalued. So on Mother's Day, we celebrate that work. And even as we have widened the definition to include all those, regardless of their gender identity, who do the labor of mothering, culturally, the work remains gendered. Not in the sense that it should or could only be women's work, but in the sense, Tronto argues, that men use this gender definition to give themselves a pass. I hear an amen. I hear an amen. They're permitted to focus on production, making money, and on protection, keeping us safe, both which can get pretty twisted, of course. But this dynamic has worked out to men's advantage and at real cost to women and mothers in particular. Instead, imagine a society centered on an ethic of care instead of an ethic of work. The benefits to the households would be immediate: more balanced partnerships, healthier and better supported mothers, caregivers. Care work valued as work no less essential than the work that earns a paycheck. Mothering is not just a private or domestic matter. I'm convinced it's the foundation of our freedom. And Tronto rightly points out that a society organized around care would almost by definition be a society organized around peace as well, wouldn't it? The work of caring for a life is simply not compatible at the deepest level with the destruction of life. Our Unitarian ancestor, Julia Ward Howe, knew this well when she called for an International Mother's Day of Peace in 1870, writing that, quote, "Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience," end quote. She imagined the day as a day when mothers across nations would refuse to let their children be trained for war. Tronto also points out that an ethic of work leaves out those who don't meet a certain mold of an independent worker. Though each of us is different in our capacities, and all of us depend on others for some kinds of care. She writes, as long as most American citizens are able to delude themselves into thinking they do not receive care, she writes, then they are able to exclude both the needy and their own caregivers from full citizenship, end quote. Poignant point. If we were to more fully bring the care ethic into political and social debates, the economic bottom line would not be so powerful. Such a society would be safer for women and mothers because their work would be honored and supported by the structures around them. It would honor the right of every woman and every person with a uterus, regardless of gender identity, to choose if and when to bring a child into the world. And it would support them in that most important endeavor, if and when they did. This is the world that Unitarian Universalism holds up. A world that holds love and care at the center. A world where the well-being of every person, whether child or elder or neighbor, is connected to the measure of how free we really are as a society, and where the work of tending to one another is honored as the holy work it is. And right now, it is countercultural. In a society organized around productivity and self-sufficiency, we as a UU community continue to gather and hold up love and care at the center. And this is so important. So today we honor mothers and all who mother, the ones who feed and comfort, the ones who listen first, the ones to whom we owe gratitude for the freedom and autonomy we have. We see you, thank you, and remember you are doing enough. But also let us not forget mothering as the foundation not only of the world as it is, but of the world that ought to be, the world we aim to build, a world that holds loving care at its center. Let us continue to work towards that world. Mothering and the support of mothering sets us free. Happy Mother's Day.